Joshua Johnson here. Good to be with you on this very busy night. Quote, I just want to find 11,780 votes, unquote. President Trump was recorded saying that in a remarkable phone call. He pleaded with Georgia officials to help him win an election he already lost. We're dedicating the first half of this hour to a special report about the president's call. This recording captures a phone call made yesterday with Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. In that call, the president urged Mr. Raffensperger to find enough votes to overturn his election defeat there.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. So tell me, Brad, what are we going to do? We won the election, and it's not fair to take it away from us like this. And it's going to be very costly in many ways. And I think you have to say that you're going to re-examine it, and you can re-examine it, but re-examine it with people that want to find answers, not people that don't want to find answers. For instance, I'm hearing Ryan, and he's probably, I'm sure, a great lawyer and everything, but he's making statements about those ballots that he doesn't know. But he's making them with such, he did make them with surety, but now I think he's less sure, because the answer is they all went to Biden. And that alone wins us the election by a lot. You know, so.
Mr. President, you have people that submit information, and we have our people that submit information, and then it comes before the court, and the court then has to make a determination. We have to stand by our numbers. We believe our numbers are right.
Honestly, this should go very fast. You should meet tomorrow, because you have a big election coming up, and because of what you've done to the president, you know, the people of Georgia know that this was a scam. And because of what you've done to the president, a lot of people aren't going out to vote. And a lot of Republicans are going to vote negative because they hate what you did to the president. Okay? They hate it. And they're going to vote. I think we should come to a resolution of this before the election. Otherwise, you're going to have people just not voting. They don't want to vote. They hate the state. They hate the governor. And they hate the Secretary of State. I will tell you that right now. And the only people that like you are people that will never vote for you. You know that, Brad, right?
Make no mistake, the President of the United States used the power of his office to pressure a political leader to help him cheat. It's reminiscent of the conversation he had with the leader of Ukraine that resulted in his impeachment. This is part of a pattern. The president has made clear for some time now that he will not let the facts or the rules get in the way of what he wants.
I won this election by hundreds of thousands of votes. There's no way I lost Georgia. There's no way. We won by hundreds of thousands of votes. I'm just going by small numbers. When you add them up, they're many times the 11,000. But I won that state by hundreds of thousands of votes. Now, do you think it's possible that they shredded ballots in Fulton County? Because that's what the rumor is. And also that Dominion took out machines. That Dominion is really moving fast to get rid of their machinery. Do you know anything about that? Because that's illegal.
Ryan Germany. No, Dominion has not moved any machinery out of Fulton County. We're having.
Oh, but have they moved? Have they moved the inner parts of the machines and replaced them with other parts?
No.
You sure, Ryan?
I'm sure, Mr. President.
We have won this election in Georgia based on all of this, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, Brad. You know, I mean, having a correct. The people of Georgia are angry, and these numbers are going to be repeated on Monday night, along with others that we're going to have by that time, which are much more substantial even. And the people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. You know, that you've recalculated, because the 2,236 and absentee ballots, I mean, they're all exact. numbers that were done by accounting firms, law firms, etc. And even if you cut them in half, and cut them in half again, it's more votes than we need.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong. We talked to the congressmen, and they were surprised, but I guess there's a person named Mr. Raynard that came to these meetings and presented data. And he said that there was dead people, I believe it was upward of 5,000. The actual number were two people that were dead that voted. And so that's wrong.
Georgia's Secretary of State gave a long, detailed rebuttal to the president's conspiratorial claims. If you haven't heard it, listen.
Well, I've listened to what the president has just said. President Trump, we've had several lawsuits, and we've had to respond in court to the lawsuits and the contentions. We don't agree that you have one. I didn't agree about the 200,000 number that you mentioned, and I could go through that point by point. What we have done is we gave our state senate about 1.5 hours of our time going through the election issue by issue. And then on the state house, the government affairs committee, we gave them about 2.5 hours of our time, going back point by point on all the issues of contention. And then just a few days ago, we met with our U.S. congressmen, Republican congressmen, and we gave them about 2 hours of our time talking about this past election. Going back, primarily what you've talked about here, focused in on primarily, I believe, is the absentee ballot process. I don't believe that you're really questioning the Dominion machines, because we did a hand retally, a 100% retally of all the ballots, and compared that to what the machine said, and it came up with virtually the same result. And we did the recount, and we got virtually the same result. So I guess we could probably take that off the table. I don't think there's an issue about that.
The president also made some personal attacks. He blamed the Republican governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, and called him names. He also blamed Stacey Abrams, who had orchestrated a massive voter registration movement.
And I know this phone call is going nowhere other than ultimately, look, ultimately I win, okay? Because
Mr. Secretary,
you guys are so wrong, and you've treated the population of Georgia so badly. Between you and your governor, who was down at 21, he was down 21 points, and like a schmuck, I endorsed him, and he got elected. But I will tell you, he's a disaster, and he'll never. I can't imagine. The people are so angry in Georgia. I can't imagine he's ever getting elected again. I'll tell you that much right now. Stacey is as dishonest as they come. She has outplayed you at every heart, at everything. She got you to sign a totally unconstitutional agreement, which is a disastrous agreement. You can't check signatures. You can't do that. I can't imagine you're allowed to do harvesting, I guess, in that agreement. That agreement is a disaster for this country. But she got you somehow to sign that thing, and she's outsmarted you at every step. And I hate to imagine what's going to happen on Monday or Tuesday, but it's very scary to people, where the ballots flow in out of nowhere. It's very scary to people. That consent decree is a disaster.
This evening, Democratic Congressman Hank Johnson of Georgia tweeted that he will introduce a resolution of censure tomorrow. He has called on the president to resign. There's almost too much to talk about with our panel tonight, so let's dive right in with them. Ned Foley is the Ebersole Chair in Constitutional Law and Director of Election Law at The Ohio State University, and an NBC News election law analyst. Eli Stokols is a White House correspondent for the LA Times, and the Reverend Al Sharpton is the host of Politics Nation on MSNBC and the founder and president of the National Action Network. Gentlemen, good to have you with us tonight. Eli, let me start with you. Any new reaction from the White House?
No, I mean, the reaction has been pretty public, Josh. You've seen there were some of the president's defenders who were at first upset that the Washington Post had only published a snippet of this, as if some of it had been edited. obviously the newspaper put out the full transcript and the full recording pretty quickly and shut that down. And it's just, this is the result of the enabling that has taken place around the president, his entire presidency, and that has happened in the 2 months since the election. The chief of staff, there are a lot of people who are out of the White House, who are focused on getting jobs. Ivanka Trump is taking pictures of herself all over the West Wing. There's a sense from a lot of people that they know it's over, but the president can't accept that. He can't get past his own denial. He can't live in a world where there was an election and he was the loser. He just can't accept that. And so there are so many people around him, whether it's in conservative media or whether it's the chief of staff, who are feeding him disinformation and playing to his vanity and his need for some sort of excuse narrative. And that was all of what he was feeding to Secretary of State Raffensperger on the call. All of this misinformation that he's gotten off the internet, off of OAN and networks like that, and that has been collated for him by staffers and put in front of him on paper, brought to him, facilitated by the chief of staff. I mean, that's what it's like inside the White House right now. You have a lot of people sort of enabling the president in these final mad days of his administration. A lot of others have just sort of, are trying to move on and sort of keep their heads down and stay out of the way.
Professor Foley, what are the legal implications of this call, if any?
Well, I think that censure motion that you mentioned is an appropriate response. We are dealing with the fact that this term is constitutionally over on January 20th, no matter what. And, the most significant event of this week will be on Wednesday, January 6th, when Congress meets to confirm the Electoral College result. And again, we know there may be some theater associated with that, but the result will be a declaration of Biden's victory, a confirmation of that. So the nation has to get through this terribly difficult moment, which is, brought about by all of the denialism that we've been talking about, the fact that the president can't accept the reality of his defeat. The voters are entitled to vote and to declare the result of what the voters want for the next 4 years. The voters have done that. The ballots have been counted and confirmed and recounted. But the president is just unwilling to accept that reality.
Professor Foley, could you clarify for us, please, what is censure and what would censuring President Trump mean practically?
Well, it's a formal official statement by Congress, a rebuke, an official rebuke, a proclamation that the president has acted inappropriately. It's been used very sparingly in American history. President Andrew Jackson, I believe, in the 19th century was censured. We could double check the details on that. Perhaps even more relevant is Senator Joe McCarthy of the McCarthyism era, when he was so inappropriate with his claims that there were communists in the State Department and communists in the Army. He received an official proclamation of censure because of his inappropriate lies. And I think there is a parallel between what happened with McCarthyism and what is happening now with Trumpism, if you will, and the denial of reality applied to the electoral process. And we could talk about whether that analogy makes sense. But I do think that's a reason to think that a formal rebuke by Congress is appropriate. The word impeachment has been used today. I've even mentioned it earlier, but impeachment obviously didn't work for the Ukraine phone call, and there's only a couple of weeks left in the term.
Right.
So censure is another tool in Congress's toolkit to consider.
And you are correct. President Andrew Jackson was censured in 1834 for threatening to dissolve the Bank of the United States. He tried to take all the federal funds out of the bank, and that was what led to his censure. Joseph McCarthy was censured in 1954 over the hearings that he held regarding so-called un-American activity. Reverend Sharpton, I'm almost not sure where to begin except where this is taking place, which is in Georgia. It seems like there's this intersection of not just the history of the state of Georgia, but also the fact that this is a state where voting and voting rights and voting access were just an issue like 45 minutes ago when they elected the governor, Brian Kemp, against Stacey Abrams. And the fact that this is happening now in terms of this fight over who gets to vote and which votes count and how they count, and efforts that are already happening to change the way that people can register and apply and vote absentee, it just feels like Georgia is always on our minds, and I wish it wasn't.
Georgia has historically been just about the capital of voter suppression, including in the last several elections the gubernatorial election that elected Brian Kemp, who now, when he will not do Donald Trump's bidding, becomes his enemy. It is the birthplace of Martin Luther King. It is where John Lewis and Hosea Williams and others that championed voting rights resided. And to really listen to the president on this tape, where he talks about Fulton County, which is a large black county, we're talking about his disenfranchising and whole suspect black voters. And clearly he explicitly wants to undermine the will of the people and implicitly wants the Secretary of State to lie. Just say that, well, I'm doing a recount or I'm looking at it again. And if that does not earn censorship, then we probably should remove censorship from anywhere in the whole body politic of this country. What we've heard is frightening to anyone that believes in the electoral process. This president using his office to tell a state official to go ahead and just say this and let's find these votes. I mean, and it borders on being criminal, but it is certainly worth at least a censorship, and if not what Congressman Johnson has called on his resignation. Clearly, he will not resign voluntarily, but he certainly should be up for a censorship vote in the Congress immediately.
Eli, here's what I don't understand. I don't understand the logic of going after Georgia's electoral system 2 days before the Senate runoffs, where two incumbent Republicans are trying to keep their seats, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, particularly since the president has been throwing grenades at the electoral process in Georgia that Republicans there need to be taken seriously for the incumbents to keep their jobs. So he's arguing that the votes that made Joe Biden the winner in Georgia are illegitimate, but the votes that would theoretically keep Senators Perdue and Loeffler in office will be legitimate. Like, this part of the ballot was fine and this part of the ballot was bad. It doesn't make sense to me. Is there a strategy here, or is this all just kind of unhinged?
No, I mean, I think you know the answer to this. I mean, when you're a pathological narcissist, logic and reason just don't really factor into the equation. The president in that call, you could hear him talking about going down, doing a rally for these two Republican senators tomorrow night, and going through and relitigating all of the nonsense that he fed on the phone to Raffensperger, making basically the final pitch to vote Republican in these runoffs another referendum on him and his own grievances. And you're right, for all the reasons you point out, it makes no sense. And there are a lot of Republicans who are frustrated with this because in the run-up to this runoff that is going to determine which party controls the Senate for the next 2 years, the president has just done everything he could to drive a wedge through the Republican Party to divide lawmakers, whether it's over the congressional certification on Wednesday, splitting lawmakers. You're seeing a lot of criticism inside the Republican caucus, between the Romneys and the Hawleys and the Cruz wing. And this all translates down to Republicans in Georgia, not just the Republicans in the rural areas where the president is going to try to boost turnout, but those Republicans in suburban counties like Gwinnett County, which are fast shifting where voters who have been registered Republican a long time are now finding Donald Trump and this Republican Party rather unpalatable. What are they seeing in the final days as they try to figure out what to do in these runoffs? They're seeing the president demanding loyalty tests on electoral college certification and trying to shake down their own Secretary of State and governor to overturn the election simply because he wants them to. Not an ideal closing message for Republicans, especially when Democrats have already appeared to have done a pretty good job banking a lot of votes early.
And Professor Foley, let us be clear, this count that's supposed to happen on Wednesday is intended to just be that, a count. They're supposed to just go and say, Donald Trump, 1, 2, 3. That's literally all that they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to go through the whole process of determining if, like, this elector's driver license was valid when they signed up. None of that is part of the process. So what do you expect to happen on Wednesday? This is obviously political theater. In a way, it's kind of designed to be political theater, the formal end of the presidential election. But how much of a melodrama is this theater going to become on Wednesday?
Well, we know the result. So we know it will end with a declaration of Biden and Harris being the next president and vice president. What we don't know is how long that will take and exactly what twists and turns in the process they may be to get to that result. And the reason for that is we don't yet know how many states the Republicans plan to object to. We've heard anywhere up to 7 states, and there could be 2 hours of debate in each chamber, Senate and House, on each state, plus the time it takes to move from the joint session when both chambers are meeting together and then when they separate for their deliberations. So this could actually take into Thursday, believe it or not, to get the final answer. It really depends on just how many objections there are. But again, the result's not in doubt, just how long it takes and how messy it might be to get there.
Is that normal? How long does it usually take? Is it usually over in like an hour, or is it usually take a day or more?
Less. Sometimes it takes, I think, a half hour. I mean, usually it's very quick because there's no objections and it's never contested. And as you say, it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's not another recount of the popular vote in Georgia or Arizona or Pennsylvania. All it is Congress saying, do we have the votes from the electors who were appointed by the states? So do we have official votes? And there's just no doubt about that even in this election. We know we have the official votes from the states. So it should happen quickly.
I would like to play another clip from this call, and I appreciate the three of you making so much time for us tonight. Rev, I'd like to get your reaction to a long excerpt from this conference call. It's about 2 minutes long, so sit tight, but it has to do with this claim that the state of Georgia might find ballots that were supposedly shredded if they decided to do President Trump's bidding and help him overturn the results there. Again, this is about a 2-minute cut from the call that NBC News obtained the recording from today. Listen.
Look, here's the problem. We can go through signature verification and we'll find hundreds of thousands of signatures if you let us do it. And the only way you can do it, as you know, is to go to the past. But you didn't do that in Cobb County. You just looked at one page compared to another. The only way you can do a signature verification is go from the one that signed it on November, whatever, recently, and compare it to 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, or even one. And you'll find that you have many different signatures. But in Fulton, where they dumped the ballots, you will find that you have many that aren't even signed, and you have many that are forgeries. Okay? You know that. You know that. You have no doubt about that. And you will be at 11,779 within minutes, because Fulton County is totally corrupt, and so is she totally corrupt. And they're going around playing you and laughing at you behind your back, Brad. Whether you know it or not, they're laughing at you. And you've taken a state that's a Republican state, and you've made it almost impossible for a Republican to win because of cheating, because they cheated like nobody's ever cheated before. And I don't care how long it takes me. We're going to have other states coming forward pretty good. But I won't. This is never given. We have some incredible talent. Said they've never seen anything. Now, the problem is they need more time for the big numbers, but they are very substantial numbers. And I think you're going to find that they, by the way, a little information, I think you're going to find that they are shredding ballots because they have to get rid of the ballots, because the ballots are unsigned, the ballots are corrupt, and they're brand new, and they don't have seals, and there's a whole thing with the ballots.
So thank you for bearing with us through that long excerpt. Rev, what do you think?
Well, I think he forgot to mention that there were Martians that had flown in and voted in Fulton County. He forgot that part. We are witnessing the President of the United States having a political nervous breakdown. He has lost it because he has really convinced himself due to his narcissism and due to the fact that he cannot face losing. He's convinced himself to the most delusional things that you could think of. He's gone from shredded ballots to comparing signatures 2, 4, 6 years. I mean, what are we listening to? This is something that is straight out of the bazaar, and it is frightening what he will do. You must remember that they're having this vote on Wednesday that is unprecedented. They've called for a rally out in Washington that we hope is not as violent or more than the last rally they had with the Proud Boys. But that's not enough for him. He berates the Secretary of State of Georgia with all of these fantasies and conspiracy theories. There's no telling what he will do if somebody doesn't step in. It is time for us to really come in and not only censor him, but really do what we can to salvage what is really what we believe in a democracy in this country.
I know we've kept you off for a while, and I don't want to go too much far over, but Professor Foley, just to put a coda on all of this, one of the things that the 12 senators, 11 Republican senators, have called for is an electoral commission to go through all of this, much like we had in 1877 with the election of Rutherford Hayes. If memory serves, that was resolved by striking a deal that ultimately pulled federal troops out of the South after the Civil War. It was one of the historical through lines that entrenched Jim Crow in the South. That was how that electoral commission ended up and made Rutherford Hayes the president of the United States. Correct me if I'm wrong, Professor, but it sounds like if this went forward, history teaches us it ain't gonna go like we think.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're absolutely correct. The commission that ended that election and the way that election ended is one of the most tragic moments of American history, because the promise of Reconstruction with the Reconstruction amendments of equal voting rights of the 15th Amendment and equal protection of the 14th Amendment, all of that was destroyed as a practical matter after the troops were pulled out as part of that compromise that ended the dispute over that election. So we don't want to repeat that history. And in fact, the statute that governs the proceeding on Wednesday, the Electoral Count Act, which was adopted in 1887, 10 years after the debacle that you were just referring to, was designed specifically to avoid a repetition of the mistakes as they saw it that had happened around the Hayes-Tilden election. So there's lots of reasons we could go into for why it's inappropriate to rely on that 1876 precedent to talk about what's going on today.
Yeah, history is very instructive, and we may make some history this week. Professor Ned Foley, the Director of Election Law at The Ohio State University, Eli Stokel's White House correspondent for the LA Times, and the Reverend Al Sharpton of the National Action Network and Politics Nation here on MSNBC. Gentlemen, much appreciated.